What's going on, guys? Rogan here, and I want to start a new series. I've already gotten into Overwatch League recently, and I think I started doing predictions last week, and I thought, why not do it on YouTube? I mean, free content, and I've got, I brought a guest with me this time, and I think we're gonna be doing it on a weekly basis if we can find the time. So, hi, Jill.
I mean, I'm sure we can find the time. I
Yeah,
think we're both
pretty sure
running out of everything that makes us busy nowadays.
this is true. All right. So there's a lot of games to go through this week.
Yeah. What is it? Two tomorrow? No, two Friday.
Two on
Like
Friday.
3
Yep.
on Saturday and Sunday each.
Yep. And then there is three games for the East region each
Right.
day. So
Yeesh. All right.
14 games to go through.
Oh my gosh.
And we have all of the rosters pulled up, the standings. So we're not skimping out on this. We know what we're talking about somewhat, maybe.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. So, starting off with the first game, we got Paris Eternal going up against Toronto Defiant.
Hmm.
So, Paris Eternal haven't really had the best start to the season. They're 1-4.
No. I think you can maybe blame this solely on the fact that their roster, even though people don't talk about it enough, is pretty new, at least working together.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, you have guys coming from Vancouver, from and sorry, I'm probably gonna mispronounce some of the Korean and Asian teams, so I'll just call them by their names. But you have guys coming over from the Charge, the Fuel, the Justice, and the Titans. At least those are the pictures that they show on the website.
Yeah. And then you've got three, what I'm assuming to be tier 2 players coming up. I'm pretty sure Down and Khan were in contenders last year. I remember seeing up on their names. Naga, I'm not exactly sure on, but I'm gonna guess that he's also a
Yeah,
rookie.
I
But
think they were all contenders because they don't give stats for last year either,
But from what
which is
I've
interesting.
seen of Don playing, like in the first 2 weeks, he seems like a pretty good Reinhardt. But then, uh, with the June
Hmm.
Joust rules they just brought in with the
Yeah.
hero bans, that might be a different story. So
Uh, I mean, honestly, yeah. I think it's. I think. I mean, we can probably talk about this June Joust ban list now
yeah,
before we go into anything else. But banning Rhine, Tracer, Zen. I mean, you're injuring just about every team
yep.
for June Joust just because you want to filter in a new meta. I
It,
mean, Rush Comp was the new meta, and now you're taking out the biggest parts of Sim Rush Comp.
I mean, what the only surviving elements are Mei and Sim in this at this point. I mean, you couldn't maybe. I mean, you couldn't maybe replace Monkey with for the bubble, but it's nowhere near as good because Ryan is the movable shield. You can go with it. You
Right?
have to
And
beat
at that point, if you're running Monkey, why not just run Double Bubble Rush Comp? I
exactly.
mean,
So,
just run Zarya Winston. You have a better shot. Even Zarya, or not Zarya, sorry, Winston Diva has a better shot if you're running Bubble.
yeah, it's. I don't think. I don't think that these people answer exactly what was needed. I mean, I understand maybe banning things like that because obviously each team was basically mirroring each other for the first couple of weeks, and then you started to see
Yeah.
some like as things went on, you started to see some variations. Like you started to see Sombra, which she's now been banned. She became a lot more prevalent, especially going into May Melee, the actual tournament.
Right.
So
I
it's
think this is just a precautionary thing
yeah.
by the league to be like, hey, like we understand that Rush meta is the meta, but maybe don't like mirror each other every game because at some point that just gets boring.
Yeah. It's a cheap way to get more entertainment out of the league, essentially.
Yeah.
So, moving over to Toronto, who are currently 3-1. They haven't really. They've had some easier teams running for their main melee. They didn't qualify. They just missed
Yeah.
out. I think the Shock just beat. No, Dallas just beat them into qualifying, I believe.
Hmm. I
So
think they were 1 game ahead of them going into qualifiers for Melee.
yeah, so they've not exact. They've had a fairly decent start. They've got a pretty decent roster. It seems like they've retained their entire team from last year, apart from they've added Lastro from Valiant. That's
Yeah, but I mean, even just looking at it, this is like, on paper and even in matches that we've seen so far for qualifiers, this team is a strong team and has the chance to be a contender.
oh yeah,
Logix is a phenomenal, tracer, and his secondaries are really good. Sato is a phenomenal tank. I mean, there's a reason that he's ranked 9th in the power rankings.
yeah.
You bring in Hisu, who's a phenomenal hit scan on a McCree or on an Ash.
You got I mean, even bringing in nice. I mean, he's
Yeah, you have really good backups for every role.
yeah. I mean, there's no reason why they can't qualify into the tournament. They just need to think, well, get it together to better term.
They need to pick up where they left off right before the end of that Melee qualifiers and just steamroll through. Because I mean, Paris is going to be a big. I don't think it's going to be a statement win,
No,
but it is going to be a big win for them coming off of a sort of upsetting qualifiers for Melee where they probably should have made it in.
they should not have dropped. I mean, I'm a Spitfire fan. Even I'm gonna say they should not have dropped a map to London Spitfire, not this new roster.
Right,
And that, even with, well, even now more than ever, because their map differentials are even more important, especially going into the June charts. They can't be dropping maps to to the lower end teams of the division. They need
right.
to be
And I
picking.
mean, even looking at it, like, because just looking at the West in general, their map diff is still +2, but that only ties them with the Gladiators,
Yeah,
and that's 3 behind San Francisco.
I mean, they've got the advantage, especially this week, of the fact that they're playing and San Francisco aren't. So they need to be picking up these maps this week while San Fran have their week off. And then, I mean, hope that San Francisco drop maps. Because they may be the champions, but they haven't exactly had the. I mean, their map differential is 11 and 6. They've tied 1. It's
Mm,
not. It's not exactly the best. When you look at Washington Justice, they've lost 3 maps this entire season so far. That's it.
yeah. I mean, there are teams out there that are setting the pace, and I mean, they're just teams that I don't think are gonna be able to keep up, and hopefully we see more teams like the defending champions and like even Seoul, who came in 2nd last year, being able to pick it up and, you know, get back into pace with these teams that are making the statements and saying, "This is the pace we're rushing at this year."
Yeah. So I think we've gone on enough about the first 2 teams, so I'm get on with the predictions. So I think I've got to go with a defiant win. I I'd love to see Paris win and start to turn their season around, but the way they've been playing compared to the way Toronto have been playing, I can't see them
I
winning.
can't I can see them maybe picking up a map or 2. I think we're more close to seeing like a 3-2 from Toronto here because while Toronto's gonna come out with with a fire from Melee, I think Paris is also gonna start to like take what they learned in the qualifiers and start to take that to the next level at some point here.
Yeah, hope so. I'm gonna go 3-1 to the Defiant.
I'm gonna give Paris an extra map here. I think we're gonna see a 3-2.
Okay, that would be nice. After the first of the most of May Melee being pretty much 3-0s, I'm really hoping that we're gonna start seeing longer series this time around. Because that's what Overwatch League is all about. You want to see them go the distance. You want to see the longer series because that's what makes it more fun. I mean, I don't know. Did you go back and watch the Dragons versus the Fusion May Melee knockout match? 'Cause
I think I did.
that was like one of the best series of the whole,
Mhm.
including May Melee, because 6 maps they went to.
And that's not to say that 3-0s can't be exciting. I mean, week 1, you throw it going all the way back to week 1, we had the Houston-San Francisco game that literally went down to less than a meter on the Havana push by the Shock.
Yeah,
They were just about to they could have won that, and they dropped it by literally, I think, half a meter on that last Havana push in overtime.
yeah, that's for sure. I mean, you can with the higher end teams, I feel like the 3-0s aren't as easy to say. Oh well, that was just a whitewash. Then like say if you have a team like for an example, the Charge playing New York Excelsior, which in on Sunday, which could be a different story. I mean,
Exactly.
yeah. Moving on to something which I have the feeling might be a 3-0, but you know,
Mm,
London Spitfire versus Florida Mayhem. Florida
I
just
mean,
gone.
on pa sorry to cut you off, but on paper, this London team should be doing things that we haven't seen in a long since Overwatch League Season 1. Shax is probably arguably one of the best tracers in the league. You have Mulfig, who's a very good tank. Hadi, who's also a very good tank. Hell, even Blase, who's one of the best DPS in the game and has been consistently.
You've got the contenders the contenders EU champions in this team. You got Hardy, Sparker, Mulfig, Reaper, Calyx. They all won with the British Hurricane last season in contenders. It's just whether they can put together what they learned with May Melee and what went wrong into a winning formula. That's what's going to define London this season. If they can't, then they're probably going to be the bottom feeder of the league, and that would be a shame considering they are former world champions.
I mean, not only are they former world champions, but they're even because we're just talking about the contenders players that moved up.
Hmm.
Even their more experienced guys, again, like Blase, these guys in the past have been good at their roles.
Yeah,
So I don't know what maybe I mean we've had this discussion off cam or off recording and off stream, but maybe it's just they don't have the team chemistry yet because it's the first year that a lot of these guys are playing together
yeah,
because London reworked their whole roster basically over the off season.
yeah.
But
It's
something's got to pick up.
something has to. It's also the case that some of these players they're having to adapt, especially more the experienced players. Some of that they're having to adapt to the meta rather than playing what they're comfortable with. So, say if you had Blase or somebody like Ash or McCree, somebody who he's played before a lot, rather than May, who is basically just coming to the meta recently because of the rush comp. I feel
Right.
like they should be playing to their players' strengths rather than trying to play towards a comp because they tried to play this rush comp in the May Melee and they paid for it because their team chemistry just didn't work for the rush comp as well as it could have. And if they can get this rush comp down right, then great. Because I mean, their main tank and their off tank. They don't need Reinhardt. I mean, Hardy, yeah, he did play a lot of Reinhardt, but he also played Monkey. Molfig is a Sigma main. These
Right.
changes don't really affect these hero bans have not don't really affect London Spitfire as much as the other teams.
Well, especially having Malfig being a Sigma, you have that mobile barrier already that you get with Reinhardt at a very at less of a cost, honestly, in my opinion, with Siggy. You get a mobile barrier at less of a cost because he can pull it back whenever he wants, and he can bring it back out within 2 seconds because his cooldown once he pulls it back isn't that long. And once Reinhardt loses his shield, that's devastating for a team. But when Siggy loses his shield, it's not as bad.
You can just get it back right away. I mean,
Exactly.
even with their support line as well, none of them they didn't play. I don't think I remember either of them playing Xana twice. I think it was Break and Bap that they mostly Calyx and Reaper mostly played. I don't think
Right. I think
I don't think I can go in and get their player stats. I don't think they're up yet. But from May made up well, so he did play a little bit, but um yeah, for most part they were what was they were just breaking Bap. So
Right.
I feel like these hero bans might in fact help London in a way more than
I do think it'll benefit London, but I think with the Zen ban, I mean, honestly, not many people run Zen right now
no.
in these comps. It's normally Lucio Bap
Yeah,
at this point. Um, but I mean, the Zen ban could help. I think this week, or maybe possibly even the whole rest of June Joust until Tracer comes back, we might not see Shax at all, or at least very rarely on very specific comps, because from what I've seen from Shax, he plays mostly and only Tracer,
yeah.
and is that kind of Tracer like plug-in for the Spitfire. So I don't think we'll see as much Shax. So I'd expect more Blase and either Sparker or Hybrid.
Have
So I mean, we could see something like a McCree come out.
I don't think we've seen Sparker play this season at all yet.
I don't think we have either, because normally I think
It's Blase
it
Sharks and
because of
Hybrid,
that rush. It's Blase Shax most of the time,
which could be
or Blase
interesting.
Hybrid.
Which I believe from contenders, what I'm saying, I believe he was a Tracer main as well. So maybe we won't see him. Maybe it will be Hybrid because I believe Hybrid is more of a hit scan player, from what I remember.
Think so.
So yeah, moving on over to Florida, which I believe these bans will
Yeah, this is gonna hurt.
a
This
lot.
is gonna hurt Florida. But can I just I need to take a second. The Florida Mayhem are a this team is phenomenal.
Oh yeah,
This team is so good. Yes, it's gonna hurt losing Yaki's Tracer and maybe OG's Reinhardt, but Gargoyle is a phenomenal tank. I mean, you have BQB, who has proven over the years from both the inaugural and last season that he can play at a very high level on a lot of different DPS. I mean, having Gargoyle's Hog or Diva is phenomenal. You could run double bubble with OG's Winston and Gargoyle's Zarya.
They're-
This team just has something going for them that I think, even with the bans,
yeah. That I think maybe with the bans it could give London a map, but I don't think it will give them the win. I mean, even looking, you got Hanzo May, who BQB can easily switch to even with this Sombra ban. And I don't think I don't think they're DPS. I know Gangman Jin was mostly a break player in Melee, and Slime, I don't remember. I think he was off Lucy on BAP most of the time.
think so. I mean, even
Yeah,
uh, for Jin, you see him play Ana, so you don't really lose that. Like, if you need an extra damage from a support, I mean, yeah, obviously you have Brig Lucio, which is just legitimately extra damage. But even playing Ana, you get that anti, which is basically just uh, Orb of Discord. You get that extra damage, that spread damage, because she can just kind of hit you from wherever,
yep,
and you get a sleep, which you don't get with Zenyatta.
no. She is essentially a better because she can heal more. She can do more healing than Zen. Zen she can do her her damaging thing. Her anti it can have more of an area of effect. Like you said, it can affect more than one person. Whereas you have to pick a specific target with the Discord
Right.
buff.
The trade off is Ana does do less damage than Zen, because obviously you see it a lot. People can get one tapped with a Zenyatta at full charge with a Discord orb. But I mean, I think having that anti is a fair trade off.
Yeah, easily. I mean, especially you got the anti, you got the sleep. You can easily target down the stronger. If you like target down specific members of each team, then you can easily pick off and win team fights. I think I don't think that Yaki is going to be very much affected unless they play indoor maps. I don't think the Tracer ban is going to affect him as much as other DPS players because his Pharah is phenomenal.
Yeah, I think he has backups where I don't think it'll affect him as much, but God, am I gonna miss watching that Tracer.
Oh yeah. So I think we should do the predictions now,
I mean, I think it's
which I think it's obvious from what you
as
said
as
what we
much as much as I wanna give London maybe a pity map because Florida is coming off a tough loss in that semifinal.
I think they've had enough time to pick themselves back up and be revved up to go for the next competition at this point.
Yeah, I think this roster is too strong. I mean, just every roster is so well rounded right now.
I'm gonna go 3-0.
Yeah, I think it's
Oh,
a
that
3-0.
hurts. Hey, do you want to do East region next, or do you want to just go straight through the West region games and then move on?
I think we should probably do East region because they play the same day.
Yeah, okay. So we got Hangzhou Spark versus Guangzhou Charge. I hope I pronounced that right. The
I
ch-
think you did.
the Charge, it's safe to say they haven't really had the best season so far. I mean, they picked up
Yeah,
10, I believe. Yeah, they have. They have 1 point on the
they're
board,
one
which
and
is
three. Yes,
it's better than. I mean, they have the exact same record as the Hangzhou Spark, which is so strange to see.
I
But
know
that Hangzhou
because the
Spark
Spark
team,
looks so strong
look at
near the
that
end there.
team.
Yeah, I
Are
mean it's upsetting because I don't get we. I mean both of us don't really get to watch as many of the East region games as I think we'd like to.
no,
But
because
like even just looking at this roster, I mean there are known players on this Spark roster. Architect coming over from San Francisco. I mean you have Shy.
yep, the
There are just plenty of these big time players on this Spark roster that I mean maybe again it's the same problem that London's having. You just don't have the chemistry yet. But on paper, these guys should be doing
a lot better.
decently well.
I think I believe they had a pretty tough May Meta in terms of qualifiers. They had the odd like maybe going through tries not LA Valiant, but for the most part they were playing like the Dragons, Philadelphia Fusion, Seoul Dynasty, Chengdu, the powerhouses of the division, which they do need to find a way to win, and they should be able to find a way to beat these rosters with the team they have. But something, like you said, something just isn't clicking yet, and hopefully they've had the time to regroup within the week that the 2 weeks that they've had off at this point
Yeah,
to come back strong. And with facing a team like the Guangzhou Charge, who haven't really had the best start to the season, would
right,
probably be. I mean, I don't want to say that they'd be fighting for their wins each and every week, but from what I've seen at their replays, they don't really. They get the odd map now every now and then, but they're not exactly the best team in the division.
right. I mean, I think that's just a case of honestly, I think for especially for the East region in general, I think the reason that they're like so honestly, the 1 and 3 teams I think would be higher in this West region, but the top heaviness of Shanghai, Philadelphia, Chengdu, and Seoul really kind of bogs down this bottom half
Yep.
of the East region, besides, obviously the Valiant.
Mhm.
But I think these teams are a lot stronger, and I think we saw it in the because I think the Spark qualified for Melee, right? If I'm not mistaken,
No,
or no,
Shanghai
they didn't.
top four
Shanghai and
qualified.
Philly did,
Yeah.
right? Um, but I think going into the qualifiers, I think we saw it in a sense that this Spark team has what it takes to make a statement, but that East region is so top heavy that it's going to be very hard for them to make a statement at any point unless they like come out and just outright win June Joust.
Which is a very hard tall order to do, especially with how these teams have been playing. I mean, some of their losses. I mean, they took the Dragons to 5 maps in week 3,
Right.
so they are still showing signs of bringing it together. I mean, the Shanghai Dragons went to the May Mayday finals. and they only just got past the Hungry Spark. It's not like
Exactly.
they're losing by much. I mean, they're taking maps off of teams like Philadelphia Fusion as well. Sure, they could have beaten New York Excelsior, but then again, New York Excelsior again, like you said, they're former grand finalists,
Yeah.
and
So it's not out of the blue to see this top heavy Eastern Division kind of being dominated, especially having so many of these American teams now coming over. Well, three of these American teams coming over to the East because of the way that the new layout has to be. I mean, bringing Philly into that division, in all honesty, kind of screwed all of the APAC teams
yeah,
because Philly has just been a dominating force both in NA and in out Overwatch League for years since the inaugural season. And then also adding New York XL is a big hit for a lot of these APAC teams, even though they haven't had, again, the strongest start this season.
I mean, New York have been in APAC a little bit, quite a few more seasons longer than Philadelphia. I know they were like quite a big competitors for London Spitfire, especially before they moved over to NA. So I think the trades that they made between the divisions weren't exactly the fairest, to put it one way.
Right,
I mean, you trade London Spitfire, who have been rebuilding since they lost players like Profit, since they lost their big name players,
right,
and you put Philadelphia Fusion in there. It's not exactly the best trade off.
exactly. I mean, basically, the trade is what Paris for Philly and London for LA.
Yeah,
So I mean, you're trading two. I hate to say it like this, but you're trading two bottom feeders in London and LA because London is still rebuilding and LA is just the Valiant at this point.
yeah.
And then you're trading two pretty strong teams. Obviously, we talked about it. Paris hasn't had the best start at 1-3 with a -7 map, or sorry, -5 map differential. But just that addition of Philly, the +9, it's going to be rough for a lot of these APAC teams. Besides maybe Seoul, Chengdu, and Shanghai.
And especially you don't have that many. I mean, with the NA region, you at least have the safety net that you can qualify at 6, and that's what benefited Dallas Fuel. You only get four
Right.
qualifiers per tournament with this East region, so
Hmm.
they really have to be fighting these top teams, and it's gonna be really hard for them to get into these tournaments. Otherwise, we're gonna be seeing the same East teams in every single one of these
Every
tournaments.
tournament. Yeah, exactly.
So I want to. I'm going to. I think with this Spark team and what we've seen from the Guangzhou Charge, I can't really give it any other direction but a win for the Hungry Spark. And
Exactly. And I mean, even I hate to, go. I mean, it's always good to go back and look at past matchups. I mean, even just what was it, 2 weeks ago now, right before May Melee started, the Spark played the Charge and they 3-0'd them. So I mean, unless something miraculously happened in 2 weeks for the Charge, I don't see this going any other way than 3-0 for the Spark.
easily, yeah. So have quite an interesting matchup the next game, which I really wish I would be awake to watch. Shanghai Dragons going up against the Chengdu Hunters, which I believe no. Was it the losers bracket? No, it wasn't because the Shanghai
Yeah.
winners bracket. But still, two main melee finalists. In terms of qualifying for the tournament,
Right.
going up against each other in the actual league season, and Shanghai Dragons have had a phenomenal start to the season. They started off a little rough. They lost a game, but they then turned it around in a big way. I mean,
Right.
this team, their DPS are just great. I mean, Li Zhejiang on the break. You got Lip. Lip. He could be very much impacted by this Tracer ban because Lip's Tracer is very good, and
Right. But I
Izayaki
mean, even if
Sam.
you exactly. I mean, even if you can't have Lip, I mean, you have Fleta to replace him. You have Erster to replace him.
You got DM.
You have guys to you have guys to kind of pick up that void that Lip might fit that might kind of open up because of Lip's lack of his tracer. But
it's well.
just this roster all around is so strong. Obviously, I am a tank, so I'm going to kind of, you know, go all googly eyes over the tanks, but Fate is a phenomenal tank, and unless he plays, like, a significant amount of Rhine, I really don't unless he is their main tank and not their off tank, I really don't see this hurting. I mean, he has a Monkey, he has an Orisa. I don't really see this hurting Fate
No,
because obviously you don't have guys to back Fate up because they don't have a third tank on their roster right now. But I mean, even Void can pick up that kind of
I believe.
that big hole.
Yeah, I mean, Void is. I believe Void is very much their diva. Their diva. Yeah, he's their diva
He is.
player. So, I mean, they can essentially switch it up. They could run. I mean, they could try and run classic dive with this composition because you've got Fate who is experienced on the monkey, and obviously
Right.
Void, who is dedicated diva. So they could make it work in that sense, but like I'm sure they'll be fine without Ryan. It's not as
Yeah,
big as the other teams. And even then, the rest of their team just picks up the slack, even if with the lack of that. Fleta,
exactly.
you could argue might be impacted by the Sombra ban, but his Farah is still phenomenal.
And even then, I mean, he has a May, so if they want to run that like pseudo rush comp, because you're not getting a Sim ban, you're not getting a May ban, you're not getting a Lucio ban, you're basically just getting a tank ban for the rush comp, and you're getting the Tracer. So you could run Sim May rush comp with a double bubble tank because Void has experience on Zarya, and run Monkey Czar with Fate and Void. But like we said, kind of in passing a little bit, and that might be my fault for cutting you off there, but the big thing that is going to be affected is Izayaki, and it's going to become a question of do we even see him play until the end of June Joust?
Exactly. I mean, have we seen much of? I don't think we saw much of Molly because Izayaki and Lee Jae-yong were very much their go-to starters. So we might see another
Right.
Molly come out. And just quickly get up who you play. So you know, obviously Lee Jae-yong is their. I believe he's Ana and their break main. So
I think he is. I can look.
they don't list it. He is not played at all. Good to know.
Right, but I mean, we've seen the Ana break from Lee. I mean, we could see Izayaki switch it up a little bit and maybe play uh, on a bat.
Yeah.
That could be a possibility because he has experience on Baptiste. But losing that Zen is a big part of that support line for them because his Zen brings in so much damage.
I mean, the one taps he was getting on some of them was freaking nasty.
Mhm.
So moving over to Shanggu Hunters, who I don't actually have anything. Okay. Anyway,
Here, I can talk a little bit
so
about the hunters. So basically, the thing that we're going to see a lot with the hunters, Jinmu is a phenomenal DPS. I mean, you have four tanks on your roster. So even if one of them is affected by that Rhine ban for June Joust, you have uh Elsa who can come in. You have Gaga, who I think Gaga and Elsa have been their one and
yeah,
two tanks all season, if I'm not mistaken.
yes, and then Amang would sub in every so often.
So like you can have Amang sub in for Elsa if he's really affected by that Rhine ban. I mean, you have three or four supports on your roster too. So if somebody played Zen for whatever reason on this roster, you have guys that can back them up. This is a very deep team that has potential again because they are a front runner right now in APAC behind only I think Philly, Seoul, and Shanghai, but that's only because Shanghai made it to the finals of May Melee. This team is strong. I mean, we saw it when Philly played Chengdu. This team bought Philly basically to their knees at points before they had to fight for that win when Philly beat them.
their support line. It's just, I mean, Evotel, far away 1985, Nisha, Monk. I believe Monk was their Zen main. But Evotel and far away with phenomenal. Nisha as well on the Ana. What they've just got so much depth in this team. There's no reason that they can't go and qualify and actually get to the June Joust. If they
Right,
if they play all their games right, if they don't drop any maps, if they win their games, they can easily do it. It's like Jinmu, he's one of the best farmers in the league. He easily competes with um Yaki on the Myth Florida Mayhem side.
right. I mean, just overall, I mean, if we're gonna move kind of more towards those predictions, I think
Hard.
this, especially for this week, because obviously we're not going through each week right now. But for this week, this is the matchup. If you're gonna watch any Overwatch League this weekend, this is the matchup you're gonna want to watch. Even if is at, you know, 3:30, or I think for Eastern Standard, I think it's at 8 on Friday. If they are replaying it, watch the replay. If you are up for the first match of the day, watch it. This is the match to watch because these teams are the front runners right now.
Easily. I can see this going. I can see it's going to 5 maps. I don't know if I can see it going to 6, but I can because Shanghai are very adept at going to 6 maps because they like to tie the 2CP games. They did it all the way through the main melee until Dallas caught them out on it. They like to.
Right, and I mean honestly, I'm more akin to 5 maps
Yeah,
just because I think Chengdu does well on 2CP.
I think
Um,
yeah, and I don't
so
know
I
how
do
long.
see this going to Chengdu, but
I
I mean
don't
really it could go either way.
I don't really see Shanghai's strategy of taking each team to 6 months going as far as they'd want it to. Not anymore. I think,
Right.
especially teams watching the main melee, seeing how Dallas did it, they can easily just turn it around in their face, and Shanghai will pay for it if they don't adapt to it. So, like you said, I can see Chengdu picking up these two CP maps off of Shanghai and not letting them tie it. So,
Right.
I think I'm gonna go 3-2 to Chengdu for this one.
That's where I went. I went 3-2
I
in favor of Chengdu
I
or
easily
Chengdu.
think that Shanghai can take it 3-2 as well, though, if Chengdu can't capitalize on the two CP maps.
Right.
So, moving into the next game, we've got the New York Excelsior, former world champions, versus the Philadelphia Fusion, who were the underdogs of last season. So, I mean, this team on Philadelphia Fusion, oh, stacked.
Yeah. This team is the definition of good. I mean, even their additions just bought more to what they already had. Because you already have guys like Alarm and Carpe and Poco and EQO on this team. And then you add guys like Hotba, Rascal, Shockwave, Mono, Toby. Y- You've basically went from the underdogs to the front runners in a season.
Like, if there's any team that has taken the offseason and made some phenomenal signings, it's this team. Like, I know we spoke about Hangzhou Spark and how they've got a stacked roster, but I think for the roster size they've got, it's decently, like, they've got backup, but it's nowhere near as big as the Hangzhou Spark. They're not gonna have a lot of players who won't be playing as much, and they've just made the most of these signings, and they've all counted. Each and every one of these signings has made a difference.
Right. I mean, just from what I know, you had Rascal, who's a phenomenal sniper on Widow and on Ash. You still have Carpe for your hit scan if you really need it. You had Hotba, who's a phenomenal. I believe he's a main tank, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I haven't watched too much New York XL. Or no, I'm sorry, he's an off tank.
He's
But
off.
you had a phenomenal Diva and a phenomenal Reinhardt in the two New York XL players that you signed. You had Toby, who's a phenomenal support player from the Dynasty, and then you add that to Alarm. I mean, this this roster. even though it's not as deep, it's still just as up there with a lot of these good APAC teams.
I mean, it's, even though it's not deep, it's like you said, they've got the strength in all of the areas. They don't exactly need the deep team because they can just have their starters out and they will do the business. And even if it's not working, you've still got strong backups. I mean, I don't think we've
Right.
seen much of EQL this season at all. I think Carpe and Rascal have been their go-to DPS starters, but like, do you need any other DPS apart from these two? Carpe has just hit, I believe he just hit 10,000 career kills in the main melee qualifiers. That's insane.
Exactly.
So, we've done a lot of talking up with the Philadelphia Fusion, and let's go over and talk about New York Excelsior, who will equally have a good team. They should
Right.
they should not be towards the bottom of APAC. But it's like we said earlier, these additions to APAC have just made it that much harder for New York Excelsior to shine as much as they used to. And you
I mean,
um,
it doesn't even come down to that, the additions, just also, uh, the Excelsior do have some new players. Yes, they're 2 of the most sort of hyped up rookies this season in Bianca and Flora, but remember, they're not used to being up here yet. They're still they might still be used to their contenders teams.
yes, but also, I mean, Bianca, I feel like he's easily transitioned into this setting, the Overwatch League setting. I mean, even though they're 1-3, he has been a phenomenal tank player for them so far. Um,
Right,
Flora, I can't really speak for as much, but Yakpung, I know, has done decently well, and I know, especially going into these bans as well, their support line is going to be probably what's most hit. I mean, Friday will be fine. He's mostly the Ana main and the Brigitte main on the team. But Jonak,
right.
he's going to be hit the most on this team.
I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pulling it up right now, but if I'm not mistaken, Jonak has yeah, he has experience on a Moira. He has a lot more experience on an Ana than a Moira. He has a little bit of experience on BAP. So you could see him kind of like we talked about with some of these other players who play specifically Zenyatta. You could see a big transition into the Ana meta where you get less damage, but you get more blocking of healing and more healing in general than you did with the Zenyatta, and letting your DPS and your tanks pick up on that damage that you're missing from the Zen.
Yeah, it's whether or not that his Ana is. I mean, he's got what 9 hours on Ana, which is it's pretty good. But like
Right.
being the dedicated Zen player, it's gonna be hard to switch off, especially when you already have on the team. I mean, I'm sure Friday can easily just switch over and he can easily just play break just as easily, and we can have Jonak on Ana. But I don't know. It's whether their DPS players can pick up the damage that they're missing. I
Right, and I don't think that they're really gonna have a problem with picking up damage. I mean, even if Flora is still starting, you have Ivy, who even just last season, as I pull it up now, but even just last season did fairly well on Farah and Hanzo. I mean, you have uh, Guan, who did well on his respective characters, or I'm sorry, he didn't play last season, but who's been doing well when he gets subbed in. So even if Flora kind of drops the ball on DPS, you still have 3 other DPS who can pick up that slack very easily.
so I still, even though they can easily do turn around the win. I can't see New York Excelsior. I can see them getting maybe a map because the Fusion have been known to drop a map to some of these teams
For
in
teams.
APAC.
Hmm.
So I can see this being a 3-1, maybe a 3-2, considering I believe New York did take Shanghai to 5 maps during the main melee qualifiers.
Right. I think I'm more akin to a 3-1 or a 3-0 because Philly is just so explosive.
Yeah,
Because they can just come out and explode out of nowhere.
I think I'm gonna go 3-1 Philly with this one.
That's where I'm leaning. 3-1 Philly.
Alright, so now we move on to the Sunday's games.
Hmm.
We don't
Sorry, Saturday's games, not
Saturday's
Sundays.
games. Yep, Saturday's games. We have Paris Eternal facing Washington Justice. Now, obviously, we've already spoken about Paris Eternal. Going over and speaking about Washington Justice a little bit, they have been. I don't know, like, I can't really speak how well they've done in past, but they have been one of the surprise teams for me this season. I did not see them being this close to the top of the league. I mean, they've dropped 3 maps all the
Yeah,
way through May Melees. I mean, this team, I mean, they've been just performing. You got Mag, who's number 1 on the tank in the power rankings. You got Bebe, who's been doing so well in the support. Their DPS line, Assassin, Jerry, and Decay. They've just got all rounders. Their team is just all round good.
I mean, this is definitely one of those pickup years that you see every so often from a team who has traditionally kind of been a bottom feeder or at the lower end of the league. But I mean, this the Mag Fury tank line has been phenomenal all season. Bebe, like you said, has been killing it on support, and even closer has been doing very well. I mean, your DPS, you have Jerry, you have Assassin, you have Decay. The these guys have picked up on that idea of we have been underdogs for the past 2 or 3 seasons. It's time to kinda turn it up and really start showing what we can do.
And I think that I don't. I mean, I don't know if we'd really call Paris a statement win, but I feel like they're going to go out and they're really gonna go for it. I'm really gonna say. I'm gonna think this is gonna be a 3-0 to the Justice. I
I think it probably is. I mean, this is gonna be another one of those wins where you sort of see that flipped narrative where Paris obviously, uh I haven't been able to watch European teams or APAC teams, but in the past, Paris has been decently good,
oh yeah.
whereas Washington's been near the bottom, and you're starting to see a flip where these top teams are starting to go towards the bottom, and the bottom teams are starting to come up towards the top.
I mean, the thing with Paris is that they were really hit in the off season. I mean, they lost FD God, they lost most of their team from last season to the Dallas Fuel, and they just haven't rebuilt as well, maybe as they could have, and maybe these contenders players haven't really adjusted as well as they need to just yet. And it could be another couple more tournaments before we see something out of Paris that 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 they're capable of, that they used to be like. So at the moment, I really feel like you gotta go with the team that's had the most more explosive and stronger team out of the blocks.
Right. I think it's a no-brainer. Either I mean, you could make the argument that maybe Paris will pick up one map because we have seen Paris pick up maps every once in a while this season.
But then you got
I mean, their map differential points at it, obviously.
I struggle to think that Paris would be able to take a map when Washington have dropped 3 maps all
Yeah,
season so far.
yeah,
It's hard to bet against Washington dropping maps at this point.
exactly.
Yeah, 3-0 for me. What are you going for?
I think it's a no-brainer. I think it's a 3-0
Yeah.
easily.
So Houston Outlaws versus Atlanta Reign. Two teams we actually haven't talked about yet. So we're gonna start off with the Houston Outlaws, which I know somebody might not be very happy about, but we're gonna talk about them.
As much as you know, as much as I have my gripes with the week 1 loss, um, this this Houston team, I have nothing but good things to say about this Houston team. I mean, you have guys like Happy, who is arguably the best McCree in the league right now. The best, without almost without argument.
Yeah,
You have Crimzo, who's been a very good support all season. You have Dante, who's been basically that like
goodness.
sidekick for Happy all season.
Yep. Django
And
has
then that
just come
tank
up.
line. That tank line.
Oh,
Piggy and Django are two of the best tanks in Owl right now. And don't let the power rankings or anything that the casters tell you let you believe any differently. The way that Django plays Reinhardt, even though the ban is in place, has been phenomenal. Some of the plays that he has made so far this season are some of the best. and you have one of arguably the best divas behind maybe Choi Hyobin in Piggy.
Oh yeah. I mean, just the fact that Janko has made the front covers of of all of the top players of the week just tells you how good of a player he is and how well he's transitioned from contenders up into the main roster.
Exactly, and I mean, even not even just talking about, like, their starters because we didn't even really talk about Juby, who's also a very good support. You have Jake, who can come in and play DPS or support if they need him. You have KSF, who, while not having a very strong first week, kind of picked it up that second week and played a very good May. You have Hydration, that if Jangu really is hurt by the Rhine ban, you have Hydration who can come in and maybe play main tank every once in a while. This team has, while not as much depth, it has very good depth.
Yeah, it has all of the tools it needs to succeed and go all the way. And it's as if they can pick up the wins. I mean, I don't Atlanta Rain. I don't want to say they're not really bottom feeders, but like I don't know if you can really say this. I mean, they've got good players easily. I mean, you've seen how they play. They've had some
Right.
harsher losses this season. I'd say. I mean, they've picked up some wins here and there, but like they've had Florida Mayhem. I mean, maybe they shouldn't have lost to Toronto Defiant, but even then, as we said, Toronto is still has a very good roster. They threw out Paris, and they took shock all the way. Like I
They
mean,
took Shock to 5 maps. I mean,
they they are good, and if when they're playing and when they're all clicking, they're they are a force to be reckoned
they
with.
play at a high level. I mean, as somebody who, I'm sure as you can tell throughout the whole of this video, enjoys breaking down rosters and looking at them on a player by player basis and on a line by line basis. I mean, Masa has been playing a phenomenal support when he's clicking. Iris is also a phenomenal support just in general, I think. Pelican, one of the best DPS in the league. You have Kai, who's also near the top of that DPS list. You have Hawk and Gator, who are two of the best tanks in the league. I mean, this team has the pieces. It just comes down to they've been taking tough losses where they've been dragging teams kicking and screaming into final games and final maps and overtimes and just not being able to convert. So I think we're not seeing the full potential of the Reign just yet, but I think there is something coming for them.
Oh, easily. And I don't think quite Adet is going to be quite yet, especially I don't think against Houston Outlaws, but I think going into these June Gels qualifiers, I think that they can easily pick up enough wins and maybe even qualify. It just depends on if you, like you said, they can turn around these map differentials and if they can turn around these last maps to actually win these overtimes.
Right. And I mean even we're saying like, you know, oh, Atlanta is 1 and 3, blah blah blah, but think about it. I'm pretty sure if they had beaten San Francisco, they would have been right up there in talks to qualify for May Melee.
Hmm. They would have been
That whole match, the match that San Francisco and Atlanta played the week before May Melee started was basically which one of these two teams is going to qualify.
and I believe if they actually won Atlanta won by enough maps, they would have knocked out Dallas because they would have had 2-2 and they would have had the map differential to do it. They couldn't do it. They could not drop two maps. They had to either 3-1 or 3-0 San Francisco.
And they just couldn't.
Yeah. So I feel like this is gonna be another San Francisco case where they're going to be dragging Houston to this fifth map, but I don't think just yet they're going to be able to convert it. But I think
Right,
this weekend they're definitely going to be able to make a turnaround of some sort, especially with who they're playing next.
right.
Anyway, I think I'm gonna go 3-2 to Houston Outlaws for this one.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm leaning. I'm between 3-1 and 3-2, but for now I'll say 3-2 because I think whenever Atlanta plays one of the top Western teams, they drag them kicking and screaming
Oh,
into that win.
so going into the next game, we've got Toronto Defiant versus Boston Uprising. Boston not really had the best start to the season. They picked up, I believe, they picked up their only win against the London Spitfire in the May qualifiers.
I believe so.
But I mean, their team is not bad. I mean, some of them haven't really been performing as much as they could have been, but they still got good players. They got players like Punk. They got. I mean, I'm 37 was great on DPS throughout the qualifiers.
Hmm.
Valentine as well. M- Munyong, if I pronounce this wrong, I'm wrong, but Munyong Bong on the support. Stand one on the tank line as well. Faith. They've got some decent players. They're not exactly the best players in the league, but they've got talking especially about the ladder, they've got some high ladder players on this team. It's just if they can actually put their ladder play into practice within the Overwatch League and convert it. Because
Right,
Punk is consistently up there with those tanks. He's always been up there. So it's and Valentine and DPS. It's just being able to convert it, and they just haven't been able to do that yet.
right. And I think looking at it player by player, uh, their strongest suit here, in my opinion, is their DPS line. I mean, I'm 37. Like we said, I'm 37, and Valentine have been good, not great like some of the other big DPS duos in this league, but they've been serviceable and good. I mean, you have Color Hex who can come in and support one of the two of them. Their tank line is very good. Like we've said, Punk and Stand One have both been in the top discussion most of this season at times, and even in if we're just looking at plain ladder, I mean, like Bree said, Punk is one of the best tanks on ladder consistently. Myeonbong has been a good support for this team. Same with Faith. They have the pieces. It just comes down to can they make. I don't want to say make that turnaround because I honestly I don't think they will this season. But can they take these pieces from this season in a possibly in a rebuilding fashion and build upon what they might learn this year?
Yeah, I think they're not gonna. I don't think they're gonna be the bottom. They won't be the bottom of the team of the West region. I feel like they did against London. They can pick up these wins against the bottom teams, and maybe if they're lucky, they might get a sixth place every like in the odd tournament, depending on how other teams in the top, if they play each other and they don't really go as far in map differentials, they could sneak in there. I mean, you saw it with
Right,
Dallas Fuel. I mean, we nobody expected them to go as far as they did. Everybody expected them to be towards like towards the end, like the uprising are. But they turned it around and they showed that they are actually capable of competing with these top teams, and it's worked for them. It's just whether or
right.
not Uprising can do the same thing. But
I think it's going to be a high task asking of
Uprising,
just yeah, especially with these top Western teams and who they've been playing recently.
yeah,
It's going to be a tall task asking them to kind of pick it up here.
I can't. I mean, I can see them taking a map off Toronto, in the grand scheme of things, but I can't see them getting. I can't go see this going to 5 maps. I think this will be a 3-1 win for Toronto because Toronto, if you look back at their main melee, they have dropped these odd maps against these lower teams in the division, like the London
Eh,
Spitfire, most of the teams at bottom when they play them, they do struggle, especially on control maps. They
mhm.
completely capitulated against the London Spitfire on um Lijiang Tower. So it's whether or not that the Defiant can turn around their poor past on these control maps and convert it into wins to whether this will be a 3-0 or a 3-1 for me.
Right. I'm leaning more towards a 3-1 because like you said, um, Toronto has a history of dropping at least one or two to some of these lower end teams, just maybe because Toronto has been going in kind of sleepily to these games.
Yeah,
But I mean, I could see a 3-0 at the same time because Toronto has been strong at times, very strong at times.
I feel like Toronto are in the same position, not in terms of like depth players, but like in terms of how they show up to games that the Seoul Dynasty are. Is whether they show up and actually want to play the game, or is whether they like come into the game and say, "Oh, this is one of these bottom teams. We don't really need to play as hard as we usually would against the other teams," and then they drop the map, and then
Right.
they say, "Oh crap, we need to start playing now to get this win." That is whether
Exactly.
it just depends on which version of this team turns up to what happens with the result. But I'm gonna stick with it. I'm gonna go 3-1 to Defiant.
Yeah. I think that's where I'm leaning right now.
So we've now talked about every single one of these teams. So now we've just got predictions to do. We'll talk about
Exactly.
these matchups a little bit. Go into detail about that, but that's pretty much our coverage on the West team's players. Um, Going into this next map, we got the Shanghai Dragons versus the Honshu Spark on Sunday morning. So like we were saying earlier, Hangzhou Spark have all of the players. They have the player depth to do this, to get their wins, but it's just whether or not they can actually show up and get the wins. And it's hard to predict them winning against a team like Shanghai who have been so dominant in the APAC region all the way through since the inaugural season.
Exactly. I mean, Shanghai has proven that they can sit up there. I mean, even they can even sit up there with the top teams in the West. Because remember, they still saw Western teams in that melee tournament and just kind of steamrolled over them. So it's not a case of can Shanghai hang in APAC and can these teams hang in APAC. It's also a fact that Shanghai can hang in the West, where I believe there are a lot stronger teams in the West than there are on the East this year.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, they steamrolled through Florida Mayhem, who actually beat the team that they're playing this weekend, which I don't think we really took into consideration. Shanghai 3-0 Florida Mayhem, who Florida Mayhem 3-1 Chengdu Hunters in the main melee. So
Right.
it's whether these teams, because Chengdu were the first team eliminated in the main melee, so it's whether these teams are going to come off this and learn from their wins, or if they're going to come into this and be raring to go. And I think that Shanghai were I don't. They were. They did show up to the final. They definitely took the map. They could have took another map, but Dallas would just proved to be too much for them. But I feel like they can pick up. I feel like they'll pick up a win against the Spark. But I don't think it will be a clean sweep. I don't. I feel like the Spark will have some offense. They will pick up a map, and they will take them to overtime in some of these maps. The Spark aren't a pushover in this league, and I feel like they will start showing that they can start picking up maps and picking up wins. Just I don't think it will be against the Dragons. I'm gonna go. So I think I'm gonna go with a 3-1 for the
That's
Dragons.
that's what I was thinking. I think like you said, I think the Spark have the potential, and I think they can take at least a map off of Shanghai. But I think Shanghai is just too strong, especially coming off a pretty devastating loss, in my opinion, to Dallas in that final. I mean, you saw it on their faces when they lost to Dallas in that last map. They looked pretty defeated, and I think that's gonna spark something in them coming off of that.
So, yeah. Um, Going on to the next game, we have New York Excelsior playing the Guangzhou Charge. Now I believe New York will turn it around in this game. I hate shit. I don't want to keep crapping on the Charge because obviously there are fans of the Charge out there. They have a big fan base and they have done well in past seasons. They just haven't really, like we said before, with these changes around with the APAC region, it's been harder for them. Obviously they played New York Excelsior before. Not necessarily this season, but they've like they come across this team before. So maybe they'll know like strategies to counter them, they'll counter pick them in some ways. And obviously, there have been enough games played this season where these teams can start counter picking some of the mainstays in the teams. So I don't think the Guangzhou Charge will be 3-0'd as much, maybe anymore, but from what we saw and what we know of the Euro Excelsior, especially with that team, it's hard. I've got to go with them for the win.
Right. I mean, it's hard to bet against a team as strong as on paper as strong as New York, especially against what I believe to be a bottom feeder in the charge. obviously, I mean, I think they'll pay. I think they'll take a map off of New York because New York this year hasn't been as strong as they should be. But I can't see them winning.
Now, arguably, I would say this next game is the second most important, interesting game this weekend. You've got the Philadelphia Fusion going up against the Chengdu Hunters, which is actually a repeat of the main Mayday qualifiers, where I believe the Chengdu Hunters beat the Philadelphia Fusion.
I can check you on that, but I believe you're right. Um, but again, listen, if you are a fan of Overwatch at all, and you watch this and you want to get into Overwatch League, just watch the APAC games this weekend, man. Really, just watch the APAC games. I mean, you have Shanghai and Chengdu, which is a rematch where Chengdu beat Shanghai 3-0, and then you have Philly and Chengdu, which was a 3-1 Philly win. So you have two phenomenal rematches in the APAC region of two of the not even two, three of the top teams in APAC this season.
Yeah, and I just why are their games so good this week? Holy crap! I mean, there are some good games. Obviously, there are some good games in the West region, but for the most part, they're matching up the top teams against most of the bottom of the division. Maybe apart from the Atlanta Rain and Houston Outlaws and Mayhem and Outlaws, which we'll get onto. But these two games are definitely the games that you're going to want to watch, or you're going to want to watch at least the VOD. If you can't get up and they're not re-showing some of these games, at least watch the VOD and go back and watch these because they will be worth the watch. And I really hope that they are because we're picking them up, and if they're just 3-0s, I'm going to be very upset.
Same. I I I mean, theoretically, a 3-0 isn't out of the question for either of these games. Like we've said, Shanghai got 3-0'd by Chengdu
Yeah,
week 1 or 2 of the season, and Philly obviously beat Chengdu 3-1 last week. Um, but that being said, I could see this going to a 3-2 because I do think Chengdu is a very, very good team in APAC.
yeah.
And I think we've been hyping them up basically all video when we talked about them, when we talked about them in Shanghai. Um, I think they can drag Philly to a 3-2 or even win it, but I think I just have to give it to Philadelphia here. I think Philadelphia's additions have been nothing but phenomenal.
I think I'm gonna have to agree with you. I think I'm gonna 3-2 Philadelphia. I think it won't be. I don't think it'll be 3-1 this time. I feel like Chengdu will have learned from their first outing with the Fusion, just like I think the Dragons have probably learned from their first outing with the Chengdu, but with Chengdu Hunters. But I don't feel like it's going to be enough to get them over the line to get this win.
Right.
Yeah, that brings our East region predictions to the end. Now we've got three more games to go over on the Sunday, and that will bring us to a close for this first week of the Junior Draft qualifiers. So, getting right into it, the first game we have is the Atlanta Rain taking on the London Spitfire. Now,
This,
uh,
this is a tough one. Honestly, as much as we've been kind of downplaying London and Atlanta, I think this is a tough one. I think this could be where we see a possible, like, I don't want to say not full turnaround, but a London finally gets a win here type of situation, unless Atlanta really comes out to play on Sunday.
yeah, it just depends on if London have been able to put together the pieces of what they've learned from each one of the matches. And I mean, what if you've seen any at all of their melee matches for the qualifiers, even though they're 0-4, they did still take a map off the Defiant, and they weren't horrible against the Outlaws. They have been learning from their mistakes the first opening weeks. It's just whether they can convert it now and start picking up these wins against some of these teams like the Atlanta Rain, because looking forward, their schedule just is nothing but the top of the division. So they need to be picking up these wins where it counts against teams like Atlanta and possibly looking to next month against Paris Eternals. So at the moment, I I really want to put London to bed, but
I I'm more inclined to say it's either 3-1 or 3-2 Atlanta, just because we've seen Atlanta take even the top teams to 5 maps,
Yeah,
even though Atlanta is currently, I think,
1 and
near the
3.
bottom
They're 1 and 3.
of, um, of the West. Yeah, just above Paris.
Mm.
Um, I think I think their record doesn't show how strong they are. I mean, they only have a -1 map differential. They're only basically a game behind the Gladiators, both in map differential and in record in general and points. Um, so I think this is where we start to see Atlanta really pick something up.
Yeah, I think I want. I'm. This is the inner fan of me. I've got to. I'm gonna go 3-2 London Spitfire. I'm gonna back them to win this. If they don't, then yeah. But it could go either way at this point.
Yeah,
It just depends on what versions of this team shows up. It's like we were saying with Toronto. If London can put together what they've done from these losses, because they picked up 3 maps in the main menu qualifiers, if they can put it together, they could turn this around, and this could be a surprise win for them. But at the same time, it depends on
right,
how Atlanta come out of the gates. Because from what I've seen, when teams come out of the gates swinging at the Spitfire, they kind of just capitulate, and you see a lot of players out of position. You'll see a lot of mistakes coming out, and obviously it's natural. They've just come up from most of this team has just
right,
come up, so it's natural. But it just depends on if Atlanta can capitalize on some of these rookie errors that are coming out every now and then. But I'm still, even though I've just said that, I'm still gonna go 3-2 London Spitfire.
yeah. I think I'll mirror you, but the opposite way. I think it's gonna be. This is where we start to see Atlanta kind of pick it up and move towards being what they should be nearer at least to the top of the division instead of near the bottom.
Yeah. All right. Next match, penultimate match, we got Washington Justice against the Boston Uprising, and I can't see like the Paris game that they've got on Saturday. I can't see this going any other way. Maybe they do they. It's not really the same position for the Uprising than against the Defiant, because the Justice just don't really drop maps as often.
I I think I think this is an. I mean, I don't even really know why we're discussing this past Justice 3-0
Yeah,
because this Justice team is too strong. I mean, like you said, they've only dropped 3 maps. They have a map differential of I believe +11.
I can check that. +9, I
No,
believe.
I'm sorry, +9. But again, they have the best map differential next to Philadelphia in the league.
Yeah, they
I
don't.
I don't see them losing to a bottom feeder like Boston,
No,
or even dropping a map to a bottom feeder like Boston this week.
this will be a very quick 3-0. Mm, yeah.
If you wanted Overwatch League tokens, don't count on this giving you many more than maybe 10.
Now this next game might, honestly, and I can see this next game going either way, because Florida Mayhem have been, as we've said in the preview, they've been amazing so far in the league, and so have the Houston Outlaws. Obviously Florida made it to the main meta. The Houston just missed out in the actual knockout qualifiers, but I think this will be a five. I think this will either be 5 or 6 maps. I'm probably gonna say 5. Neither of these teams have really. I mean, Houston have tied to 1 map, I believe, but neither of these teams have really tied maps often. So I feel like this will
Neither
be.
of these, yeah. Houston has tied 1 map, and Florida has tied 0. So neither of these teams are very much known for tying maps. I mean, no teams, honestly, in most of Overwatch League are known for tying maps at times. But that being said, I think Houston is a little bit more well rounded than Florida. I think Florida very much depends on their DPS and support. Even though obviously I sung very high praises of OG and their off tank. I think the Reinhardt ban is going to hurt OG a lot, and I don't think it's really going to hurt. Well, mm,
I mean, it
I can
could.
I can also see it going either way because the Reinhardt is also gonna hurt Django a lot, but
Yeah, and Jengu, I mean, we haven't really seen much else apart from him playing Reinhardt so far, so it's going to be interesting to
right,
see how he adapts to this ban, whereas OG, he can switch onto the Monkey, and he can play Winston just as easily. So
right,
maybe this ban will benefit Florida, in this match specifically, maybe it will benefit Florida more than
right,
the
because we might have to
Jungle.
say the Houston 3rd tank, if I remember if they have a 3rd tank. Yeah, we might see more of Hydration
Yeah,
this week being their main tank, but I still think I see Houston winning this, uh, 3-2, solely because I think Houston has, um while yes, Yaki is very good and is arguably the best tracer in the league right now and has a very good Pharah, I just think KSF, Dante, and Happy alone, even without Jake, is just such a dominant 3 line where even though KSF had a pretty awful first week, has really turned it around and picked up his May play very well.
yeah. And I mean, we've seen how Florida have come out against some of these top teams, especially when these top teams are playing to go out and come for blood, like they did it, like the Shock did. I mean, I know the Shock were coming out to prove a point because they lost to the Houston Outlaws, but Houston could come out in the same way because they got knocked out in the qualifier, the main qualifiers, the knockout qualifiers. So it just depends on if Houston come out swinging and they come out to win and want to prove a point, or if they're just coming into it thinking that they'll get the win. I think I I originally had it at 3-2 Mayhem, but I think I'm gonna use this one. I
Yeah,
Yeah, I think even though OG can switch and they can run the monkey. I just think that the DPS line on Houston is just that little bit better. Even though
yeah.
Florida is still very good, don't get that twisted. So yeah, that wraps up our week. Oh well, our week 6 predictions for the Overwatch League and the week 1 predictions for the June Joust. Let us know in the comment section below what games you're going to be watching, if you're going to be watching any games, and what scores you think your team is going to get this week. And if you enjoyed this video, please do hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and we'll see you again next week. So, bye!
See